I live in Saint Paul. We work in Saint Paul. I thought it would be great to do a project was really about our hometown and something that is a record and a celebration of the sort of forgotten places and the celebrated places. And so thinking about a mobile hotel room which travels around and occupies the city in all these different ways and how it can enliven things is really what our goal was.
So where are we now?
This is a community garden, and this was, a place which they were nice enough to let us use when some of the other places that we had set up kind of fell apart. These shipping containers are, they're ubiquitous, right? They're on the backs of trucks and everything. We see them all the time. We thought it'd be fun to, take one, as a lot of people have taken shipping containers, and celebrate them and make them into something that's really luxurious rather than, simply industrial. You can see here the doors have just been pinned open, and we just use that opening. And basically for permitting and practical issues moving around, we put it on a trailer. Our original idea was to just have the container and have it picked up like containers get picked up and just put on a porch. And in that case, this thing can all just close up. And so the doors actually close up over the glass, and you could actually ship it somewhere. These are locally made fixtures here. It was really important to use products here that are local and still make it something that's kind of off the shelf in a way. This was a way of saying, how can I take something found like a container and then stick all this stuff in that we can go buy at the store, for example, to really make it sing. And so all the flooring comes from flooring manufactured in Wisconsin, which does all these really natural oiled floors. This is a 8-foot by 20-foot shipping container. There's a lot of people who build tiny houses in something this size, and there's a whole kitchen, and there's all these kind of folding things. Our stance was a little different because we wanted to do just a hotel room. And the idea of being a hotel room in the city is that the city is your lobby. And so you go out and you interact with people for, eating and dining and obviously shopping, whatever it is you're doing locally. So our goal with this was really to make something that's really luxe and make the most out of the space that's here, even though it's small. Kind of say, all right, I'm going to build my bed in like you see in a ship. And that's okay. It's a pain to make the bed. My daughter was over here yesterday making the bed, and she gave me the biggest frown. I was like, this is a real pain to make. And I'm like, well, what do you want us to do? Right, it could be a Murphy bed, I guess. But other than that, even this fantastic sink, it's barely bigger than a baptismal font, but it's got a bar on the end for your towel, and I can put this stuff down underneath here too. Yeah. And the shower is a full-size shower. It's nicer than the one I have at home, literally. So the idea of not having to sort of flip all these things around and just kind of have a small sitting area and sort of making the bed also sort of in a way your living room. Having this window that really, the bed is in the window and the window is the bed is, I think a different way. We're looking out in here. You can see it's just green out there. The other thing is, all the text here was actually done by a local sign making company, the Live Large on the ceiling. And so this overlay of text, you see the headboard, kind of gives you a headboard with boards, if you know what I mean.
Headwaters.
Yes, headwaters. Underneath here, it says warm feet finish for warm feet. So all these floors have in-floor hydronic heat underneath the floor because this is a winter project, not just a summer project. One of the things you find about containers is that they're almost ubiquitously Californian because I don't really need all that great of insulation. In this case, insulation's really important, and even though we couldn't get as much as we'd really like for the really cold days, this still functions in the middle of the winter. On Thanksgiving, we had a humongous snowstorm, and so we were in here and we was like, yes! It worked great. We slept overnight. We do modular houses, which are, we make boxes, and a lot of people say our houses, our actual real houses that people live in all the time, look like shipping containers, and they actually mistake them for shipping containers. The difference is when you make a house from scratch, you're giving it a really good envelope. I don't need to worry about some of the things with the constriction of space and adding insulations. And if I were to add how much insulation I want, which is up to a foot, we'd have a much smaller space in here, right? But I think that it wouldn't have been as successful an art project if we just made it from scratch. Because I really wanted to talk about the mobile aspect of this. By using a shipping container, it forces us to think differently and experiment to a certain extent about some of these things that other people have been doing and that one could do with prefabricated shells. This is an exercise also for us to inform our other work with the weeHouse. Our plan was not to make prefab houses. We did the first weeHouse as a solution to a client who wanted to put an inexpensive retreat on her land. She spent a lot of money on her land. She didn't have much left over for a house, so we said, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we can give you a pole barn, which is a big space with not much inside, or we can give you a little jewel box. And so that's what we did, is we did the little jewel box. We've been doing the weeHouse stuff from 2002 or so. And at that point, 3D modeling on computers wasn't really a deal. So we'd make these little wood models, and some of these guys are actually a way of sort of dealing with the concept of a tube. It makes a house in a way, and it's riffing off the original idea of our original weeHouse. And so what we did is basically take a whole bunch of different materials and see what we could do with them. So the concept of say, taking something like this, which is offcuts of materials, and making something beautiful like that, can actually be scaled up to a whole house if you sort of think about it in those terms. You start out with a really simple idea. It doesn't get any more simple than a tube. This is what we started out with the original weeHouse, is I'm going to take an 8-foot high volume, because that times out with off-the-shelf sliding glass doors. And we're going to wrap that, and we're going to make the space go right through, So there it is. And whatever your landscape, whatever your view is through there is what you get. As I said, it wasn't our plan to make prefab houses. Our plan was just to meet clients, her needs, but the response from that was, let's just say we did that project at the right time. It's a time that's very similar to what we're seeing now. There's a shortage of workers, and there's a shortage of places to live, and the cost for both real estate and building is really, really expensive. And so there was a lot of people interested in the idea of building smaller and then building off-site, and the idea that I could sort of pick up the phone and order a house. I mean, that's not really the reality, but we've tried to work as much under the, under the program of trying to provide another way for people to achieve their dreams and not have to be rich, essentially. What we're doing I don't think is new in any way. This has been taking place in the history of modern architecture. From the early part of the 20th century, the best architects have really thought about industrializing housing and doing it in a way which is humane and good. The reason why I think a lot of that stuff hasn't really stuck as a thing, like an iPod, for example, that we can just sort of pick up and do, is that building is very local. You're dealing with a lot of codes and regulations which are meant to keep people safe and to keep cities of high quality. And so there's a lot of fears, there's a lot of, the progress is slow moving. We know a lot about prefabrication and off-site construction and modular construction. We've dealt with agencies all around the country, and we didn't really realize there was that much resistance to in the building departments to shipping containers as there really is. They're made in China almost always. The structural engineering and the inspections all happen in China, so the authorities are really reluctant to say that they're structurally sound, even though you can put over 100,000 pounds in those things and stack them something like 8 high and have them be seaworthy, which, I'm pretty sure that a person's going to be able to stand inside with one without them falling apart.
Why would a city be concerned about something that's so small and mobile and self-contained and has its own sewage and,
It doesn't check the boxes. There's a list and you have to check all these boxes. And one of the first boxes that it has to check is in, what is it? Is it a hotel? Well, not really. Is it an art piece? Well, yes, it's an art piece, but I can't really legislate this thing for an art piece because you want to sleep in it. Well, if you're going to sleep in it, you're not allowed to sleep in anything in a temporary structure. So is it a temporary structure? Well, yes, except for you've got plumbing in it or whatever. And so you start going through all these things, and the bottom line is it doesn't check these boxes. We've got a lot of experience working with modular design, and we said, great, we're just going to permit it through the modular process. Well, it turns out that containers aren't accepted by the same modular permitting industrialized building council permitting process. This is an art project. It's not meant to be a new model for urban living. It's simply a way of, I think, vitalizing the city and making stories about where it's going and where it's been that people can share. When we were in architecture school, there was this book, Invisible Cities, that was about the life of a city having a story, and that each city was identified through their story in a different way. By traveling around, that process becomes something of a memory about, like, this is my city. And so we had an experience where we were setting up, a woman comes up and she says, "What's this?" And I was a little short. I just said, "It's a one-room mobile hotel." And she pauses about this long. She says, "Oh, we really do live in a great city." This is one of those spaces that I didn't even know it was over here, and it's 3 blocks from our office. Okay? I did not know there was a community garden here. So here we are. We're at, the community garden, which they are gracious enough to let us be here. One of the things about having something that's mobile, and, mobile pretty often, rather than just mobile once in a while, is that this stairway has to be mobile, and the railing has to be mobile, so this whole stairway can flip over to that other side. And so because this is a truck, or a flatbed trailer, you can see that this is basically how you handle it when you're shipping goods. And so we just used a clamp to stabilize this thing. These 2x really go right down into the factory slots from that stuff.
So the stairs are just off the shelf, kind of?
It's like a mobile home RV type stair. And this thing also unbolts and goes to the other side as well, too. You know, ideally in this spot, this is a little embarrassing because I really wouldn't want this on film, but you can show it anyway. It works perfectly if it goes down to the level of the parking lot. It doesn't work so well when we're actually going onto the curb, but that's where we parked it, so that's where it goes.
So you actually did the toilet and the shower, which is a kind of risky thing in the U.S. The Euro shower.
Yeah, I mean, we can learn things from the Europeans. In Germany, I believe, oops, that's on right now. The Europeans think nothing of having a wet bath. And so it's like, great, well, we're going to see what we can do with that. And we're going to do this separating toilet in here because it works with our composting system. It comes from Finland. You sit on the seat and you can see that this,
That's great.
yeah, so you can see that when the seat goes down, that opens up. And the so-called solids go in that area. And then the liquids go here. And, you know, it works for men and women. And the cool thing is that each time it goes around, it also turns bucket a little bit so that you kind of, you know, don't end up with a mound right up there. This has got a fan, so it continuously vents up through the roof. And the thing you see on the outside actually is so-called smokestack or flagpole, which is actually the vent for this thing. And then we wanted to have a linear drain. So the toilet can sit on that sloped floor without having all these angled darts and everything.
Why the slight slope in both the bathroom and this space?
When you're faced with restricted space, the way to make things seem bigger is to restrict other places. So in this case, because we wanted to have a pristine envelope insulated up above there, there's actually an elbow that goes out to the outside here. So that's the function here. This also allows me to have a light back here, which lights not only the living room a little bit, but back here even while the shower's on. You have this space up here, and depending on where you are, you'll get that depth. And then the back, it's a really subtle thing, but it does increase the sense of space out there. But it also, I think there's certain times you want to kind of cocoon. And obviously this thing with wrapping the whole thing in wood was not the easiest thing to do, nor the cheapest, but it really provides a pretty luxurious experience which you can kind of afford to do in a small space. You know, one of the things about building a bed that's just as wide as what we have here is that you need to kind of make it seem a little bit bigger. One of those things is the window here. And the other thing is this little sort of shelf in here. And so, you know, you have to put your stuff somewhere. That's where the thermostat is.
By digging into the wall, in a sense, does that create space? I mean, does that...
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think really because you can put a book there or you can put these little lights there.
Oh,
ooh, nice. Not having a lot of space isn't that big of a deal as long as you can kind of find room for the things you actually have. So we squeeze this extra storagey kind of stuff in here, and some of them are just push drawers, so we can put in, you know, the fire extinguisher, which is supposed to be on the wall. It's not on the wall at the minute, so somebody will get mad at me for that. One thing we found out here is what it does take to be warm enough. So we've got triple glazed windows. We're also moving more into passive house windows like they have been in Europe for quite a long time, and just really efficient windows. And that's all part of your envelope, right? So you've got your window system. We've got a supplemental heater when it gets really cold. The issue is we've got solar panels on the roof so that they run this split wall AC unit. When it's really cold, it's usually when it's sunny out, and I can run my compressor out back to create heat as well as air conditioning on this unit here. Unfortunately, we didn't necessarily plug in on the fact that when it gets to be, you know, less than, say, 10 degrees out, that doesn't work very well. And so we have a gas boiler as well that runs our hydronic hot water, but it also has a split loop for all the in-floor heat. And then we also have a toe kick radiator here which runs off that same system. And with those systems, we can kind of cycle up or down, you know, the need. And even though it's probably not an ideal system, I think, given a little bit different setup and a little bit better budget, it is workable in this small space. And then back in here is our dual purpose boiler, so that provides our domestic hot water for, you know, our shower, and it also runs the in-floor heat tubing. It's really good to plug in with some of these systems and see how they work together practically. So you have to access all that stuff. You know, this is essentially a well pump. It is a well pump. Underneath this bed is a big, huge potable water tank that holds 250 or 300 gallons. That gets then pumped by this guy and pressurized into the holding tank here, and then that pressurizes the systems. This is dialed in so that it's right about a gallon per minute for the shower flow, and that is just enough to make that whole boiler work. We've got a urine tank up here. You can see that we're about a third full. We empty that every so often and dispose of that. And then down underneath this thing is the gray water tank, which filters all the water that comes out of the shower and the sink here. So you can see this is actually the vent for the toilet. There's a light inside here. That thing actually illuminates at night. And that cap at the top is an insect screen so bugs don't get in there. So the solar panels just run this hotspot energy compressor here. And then the gas tanks just make it so it's a more efficient backup from when there isn't solar or when it's nighttime. Basically for about $75 worth of gas, we can heat this thing for an entire winter. Oh, it's always good to have your toolbox branded. So you can see this is the gray water thing. And inside here, if I were to take this off, there's a bunch of trays. And the trays have organic filtering medium. Even though we're using 100% organic natural soap, it's good to just filter all the other kind of stuff out and their body oils and all that stuff. So what happens is the water comes in the top, it filters down through all these trays, and it comes out the bottom, and then it gets ejected to either holding tanks, or in this case, it's green enough to just basically go into the garden back here. One of the big issues about shipping containers is they don't make good buildings. It doesn't have the greatest insulation. This used to be called the lightHouse instead of the lightHotel, and we're running a parallel effort called the lightHouse, which is a purpose-made living unit. It's got 1 foot thick walls, floors and ceiling made out of structural insulated panels, that has a full kitchen. It's 400 square feet. That is meant to be what this thing is not meant to be, right? This is a hotel. That's an actual well thought out iPod house, if you will.
So legal, yeah.
Legal residences, right?
Right.
On top of garages, on top of buildings.
Yeah.
And the idea is we're going to put a lot of time and energy into these buildings, and we're not going to allow you to change them. So the weeHouse is a custom program which allows us to take modular construction and make them whole houses, like big houses, small houses out of boxes. We've made weeHouses as small as about 350 square feet, and we're doing more development size things. Well, we're doing one on a rooftop right now, which is 7 apartment living units. But basically the shell is that way for a purpose, and all the technology and everything comes with it. I don't need to go and say, all right, what kind of heating system am I going to have? Because it's like it's already in there, and it will work for cold climates as well as hot. Modular space is this big. It fits on a truck, and it's like a certain size, and I can make it longer or shorter, and I can put them side by side and stack them up to make bigger structures. But that's still like a modular space thing. The great thing is I can finish everything you see here in a modular way.
Yeah.
However, at some point you say, you know what, that's all fine, but I want more of a barn space. Now we're in the Midwest, everybody loves barns. A 2-story space doesn't need to be huge, and so we've done a number of barn houses too. And so things like this project are something in between, right? It's sort of not really modular, but it's sort of self-contained in a little thing. I wouldn't profess to have a manifesto, but I think that you need to be flexible as a designer to respond to the tools that make sense for the clients you're working with, or where you're building for and the time you're building them. These are, we need uniforms when we're doing the work or setting the houses a lot of times.
Because you guys are doing it yourselves.
A lot of times, yeah. I mean, we don't set the houses so much anymore, but we have, definitely.
Wow.
And it's more fun, right? The immediacy of working on them with your own hands makes a big difference. I think a lot of us would probably rather be swinging a hammer than sitting behind computers. What do you guys think? You guys are trying to be industrious? When we started working on modular design, we started out thinking of it as an inexpensive program, and the more that we really understood what it meant to build sustainably, we realized that we couldn't take shortcuts on a lot of the quality kind of things, and so we just had to have the right materials and systems in place. Building any project from scratch, it's an endeavor, right? I mean, you have to have land, you have to hook up to utilities, because that's what's required in cities, and it's not an inexpensive thing. Now, one of the problems, and you see in here, is that as we experiment with these things, we learn about which systems work best together. I'm hoping to see just a better job out of everybody in terms of like putting all these things together in an economical and functional way.